The Stuart Dynasty, which ruled Scotland from the late 14th century and later the whole of Britain, saw its dramatic end in the wake of political upheaval, religious conflict, and international wars. Their rule shaped the course of Scottish and British history, particularly through their pursuit of absolutist power and their complex relationship with religion. The fall of the Stuarts in Scotland marked the end of a distinct political era and the birth of modern Britain. The Stuart family originated in Scotland and came to the throne in the 14th century, starting with Robert II in 1371. The Stuarts would go on to become one of the most influential dynasties in British history. They presided over a period of relative peace in Scotland until the late 16th century, when religious tensions, particularly between Catholics and Protestants, began to erupt across Europe. In 1603, the crowns of England and Scotland were united under King James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England following the death of Elizabeth. This union of the two crowns created a personal union that paved the way for political unification. However, the Stuarts' rule over England and Scotland was never without challenge. Their pursuit of absolute monarchy, disregard for parliamentary authority, and religious conflicts would eventually bring about their downfall. One of the principal factors that led to the fall of the Stuart dynasty was religion. The Reformation had swept across Europe in the 16th century, dividing Protestant reformers and Catholics. Scotland, like much of Britain, became predominantly Protestant following the Scottish Reformation in 1560, led by figures like John Knox. The tension between the Catholic Stuart kings and their predominantly Protestant subjects would create a deep rift. King James, though raised as a Protestant, maintained leniency toward Catholics. This was compounded by his son, Charles I, who not only married the Catholic Henrietta Maria of France, but also pursued religious policies that many of his Protestant subjects found suspect. His attempt to impose Anglican practices on the fiercely Presbyterian Scots through the Book of Common Prayer in 1637 led to the Bishops' Wars and ultimately the broader conflict of the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651. The English Civil War was a defining moment in the downfall of the Stuart dynasty. Charles I's refusal to compromise with Parliament on matters of taxation, military control, and religion led to a brutal conflict between royalist supporters of the king and parliamentarians led by Oliver Cromwell. Scotland, initially supportive of Charles, eventually sided with Parliament due to their opposition to his religious policies. This alliance was key to Parliament's victory. In 1649, Charles was tried and executed for high treason, an unprecedented event in European history. His execution marked the temporary end of monarchy in Britain and the beginning of the Commonwealth under Cromwell's leadership. For the first time, the divine right of kings, a doctrine that the Stuarts had fiercely defended, was called into question. Charles's death had a profound effect on the Stuart dynasty and the political landscape of Britain. Following Cromwell's death and the collapse of the Commonwealth, the monarchy was restored in 1660 under Charles II, the son of Charles. The restoration initially seemed like a return to stability, but the underlying tensions that had plagued the Stuarts' rule remained unresolved. Charles II was a pragmatic ruler, but he too faced issues related to his Catholic sympathies and the growing power of Parliament. The crisis reached its peak with the succession of Charles's brother, James II, a devout Catholic. His open Catholicism and attempts to promote religious tolerance for Catholics alienated much of his Protestant population as well as Parliament. In Scotland, where Presbyterianism was strong, James's rule was especially contentious. His policies led to widespread fears of a return to Catholic absolutism and ultimately sparked the Glorious Revolution of 1688. The Glorious Revolution was a watershed moment. James II was deposed, and his Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch husband, William of Orange, were invited to take the throne as joint monarchs. The revolution was essentially bloodless in England, but it resulted in a brutal conflict in Ireland and significant unrest in Scotland. Even after the Glorious Revolution, the Stuarts did not give up their claim to the British throne. James fled to France, and his supporters, known as Jacobites, from Jacobus, the Latin form of James, launched a series of attempts to restore the Stuart dynasty. These Jacobite risings occurred periodically over the next 60 years, with the most significant being the risings of 1715 and 1745. The 1715 Jacobite rising followed the death of Queen Anne, the last of the Protestant Stuarts, and the accession of George I of the Hanoverian dynasty. James Edward Stuart, known as the Old Pretender, sought to reclaim the throne but failed due to lack of coordination and support. The 1745 rising, led by Charles Edward Stuart, the Young Pretender or Bonnie Prince Charlie, came closer to success. Charles landed in Scotland, where he gathered a Jacobite army and won several significant victories, including the capture of Edinburgh. However, the Jacobites were ultimately defeated at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, the last pitched battle on British soil. The failure of the 1745 rebellion marked the definitive end of the Stuart claim to the British throne. The fall of the Stuart dynasty had a profound impact on the political, religious and cultural development of Britain. The decline of Stuart power and the transition to the Hanoverian monarchy in 1714 reshaped the British state in several key ways. One of the most significant outcomes of the fall of the Stuarts was the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 and the subsequent Bill of Rights in 1689 fundamentally altered the balance of power between the monarchy and Parliament. The notion of the divine right of kings, which the Stuarts had championed, was effectively dismantled. From this point forward, British monarchs ruled with the consent of Parliament, and the political influence of the monarchy was significantly diminished. The fall of the Stuarts marked the beginning of modern parliamentary democracy in Britain. It set a precedent for a system of governance in which the monarch's powers were limited by law, and it was the foundation for the gradual development of the British Constitution. The fall of the Stuart dynasty also contributed to the solidification of Protestantism as the dominant religious force in Britain. The Glorious Revolution confirmed that a Catholic monarch would not be tolerated in Britain, and this was enshrined in the Act of Settlement of 1701, which barred Catholics from inheriting the British throne. The defeat of the Jacobites, many of whom were Catholic, reaffirmed this Protestant supremacy. In Scotland, the fall of the Stuarts led to the dominance of Presbyterianism and the marginalisation of Catholicism. The religious tensions that had plagued Stuart rule were largely resolved in favour of Protestantism. Those sectarian divides would continue to shape British and Irish politics for centuries. The fall of the Stuart dynasty was closely linked to the eventual political union of England and Scotland. In 1707, during the reign of Queen Anne, the two countries were formally united under the Acts of Union, creating the Kingdom of Great Britain. While the Stuarts had ruled both England and Scotland since 1603, their fall and the subsequent Jacobite risings demonstrated the necessity of a more stable and unified political structure. The union helped to prevent further Jacobite attempts to exploit divisions between the two countries and contributed to the emergence of Britain as a major European power. The political and economic integration of England and Scotland played a key role in the development of the British Empire in the 18th and 19th centuries. The fall of the Stuart dynasty marked the end of a turbulent chapter in British history, characterised by religious conflict, civil war, and political upheaval. Their downfall and the rise of the Hanoverian dynasty ushered in a new era of constitutional monarchy, parliamentary democracy, and Protestant dominance. The Jacobite risings, while significant, ultimately failed to restore the Stuarts to power, but they left a lasting legacy of cultural and political change in both Scotland and Britain as a whole. The fall of the Stuarts was a crucial turning point that set Britain on the path to becoming the modern constitutional monarchy it is today.